My name is Kristen Diefenbach. I'm the president of the USCCE, and we're delighted to welcome you to the third day of the USCCE May Mini Summit that we are doing virtually this year, hopefully leading up to our September virtual mini summit that we'll be doing this fall, and then getting back together live in June of 2022 in Spokane. Also want to mention very quickly, if you'd like to tweet, quality coaching is where we're tweeting out of, and then to think about our thank our sponsors, Fit Publishing, KT Tape, Roman and Littlefield, and Human Kinetics, who have donated some nice prize packages that we will be raffling off through this, who's been attending and sending some of those messaging out. So with that, without further ado, let's go ahead and move to our first session of the day, Emerging Systems of Coach Education and Coach Development, being facilitated by Sam Callan and Kim Kiosklis, and I will let them go ahead and introduce our panelists and get our session going. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Kristen. And another little housekeeping item too is that as questions pop in, please put those in the chat. Cam and I are going to be keeping an eye on that. We're going to start out with giving our presenters a few minutes to talk about their organization and the role that coaching plays in it, and to give you an overview. Because I know I'm sometimes really curious about how some of these organizations work, even though they may be very well known. And so with that, a quick introduction of our group. Here is first of all is Gary Cimaglia from Special Olympics, North America Special Olympics, and he will tell us the breakdown of that, because I have lots of questions about their organizational structure, as we talked about a little bit earlier. We've got Allie Riley from Girls on the Run International, a little more straightforward there. And we also have Paul Caccamo from Up to Us, that an organization probably many of us are familiar with. And we're also waiting. We're having a little technical difficulty. Hopefully Cliff Cook from Lakeshore Foundation will get in, and we'll get Cliff on board here as well. So we're going to start with giving our panelists a few minutes to talk about their organization and the role of coaching in it. And we're going to start off with Gary. So Gary, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Sam. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Gary Cimaglia. As Sam did such a wonderful job with that and hit it right on the nose. I'm the Senior Manager of Coach and Sport Education for Special Olympics North America. I've been with Special Olympics now for over almost 25 years in various capacities, and this is my most recent role. So really quick background on the organization. As Sam said, I know a lot of people know the term Special Olympics, but there's certainly a lot of layers to how our organization is structured. Special Olympics, Inc., Incorporated is the global organization that oversees programming throughout the world. There are 7 regions throughout the world that fall under Special Olympics. I happen to be in the North America region, Europe, Eurasia. I'm going to get these. I'm not going to get them already. Europe, Eurasia, Middle East, North Africa, Asia Pacific. Yeah, I should know them all. Latin America. And if I remember, I'll spit them out. But there's 7 regions similar to North America. So we have jurisdiction over Canada, the United States, and the Caribbean programs. All right, so that's what we oversee. My primary job is in charge of coach and sport education, have oversight for all those programs. Underneath each of those programs are different states or countries, depending where you are, or provinces in Canada. We'll just use the United States as an example, that there's 52 US programs underneath Special Olympics North America. They're all independent programs, independent 501c3 programs that have their own board, their own staff, their own kind of internal structure. But ultimately, they fall under the guidance of Special Olympics North America. Canada has 12 provinces, the Caribbean has 21 countries. And again, they kind of all run independently. So Canada's rules aren't always the same as the US program rules when it comes to certain policies and procedures. But in general, the sport rules are all fall under the Special Olympics realm. So coach education is huge within our program. And in fact, when I started almost 25 years ago, that was my primary job in Special Olympics Rhode Island. I was hired to be the training director for that program, and ultimately prepare our coaches to help prepare our athletes, right? In our organization, we get a mix of a lot of different people who want to, what they would term help, right? And so it's not always the sport knowledgeable coach person. And opposite of that, and sometimes we get sport knowledgeable people, but who might not know how to work with persons with intellectual disabilities, right? The majority of who we get are those folks who just want to work with Special Olympics teachers, coaches, teachers or special educators, family members of persons with disabilities, former unified partners who have been in Special Olympics. So a unified partner, so we have unified sports. So if you think of a team that has persons with intellectual disabilities and persons without intellectual disabilities participating together as teammates, that's what unified sport is. So a lot of times if a unified partner participated for so many years and now is a little bit older but still wants to contribute, they'll come back as a coach. So what coaching in Special Olympics means is we really need folks who are conscientious of not only sport, but of how to teach that sport to persons with different disabilities. And so we have several learning platforms and opportunities that have a mixture of sport-specific trainings, as well as how to coach Special Olympics athletes. And we try to encompass that all together, right, to make that complete coach as best we can within the organization. We guide that from our level, but our programs are the primary ones who make that happen, right, who deliver that training. And so each program may do it a little differently based on the needs of their coaches at their program level. But the primary piece behind it is breaking down sport to its very basic levels so our coaches not only can understand it, but then can teach it to our athletes. And at the same time, delivering that to multiple different intellectual disability levels within a team. So a basketball team could have all sorts of levels, high level, low level in terms of ability, but also different levels of intellectual disability as well. And so what strategy might work for one athlete who might have Down syndrome might not work for one athlete who has autism, right? So how do you make that all kind of come together? And it's not easy, and there's no perfect science for it from our end. It's just a willingness of our coaches to be able to want to learn and then be able to deliver that within their program. So it's instrumental in what we do. It is definitely the foundation. And I say this all the time about Special Olympics. We could raise all the money we want in the world. All of our coaches are volunteer coaches. If they decided they weren't going to coach tomorrow, it would be very difficult for Special Olympics to have a program. So it's our job to make sure that they enjoy coaching, are getting educated to be successful coaches, because ultimately the experience of the athlete in sport is what we're shooting for. So, that's really just a general overview of what we do and how we deliver that. We do have a Special Olympics North America coaching progression that has 3 different levels: a certified coach, a level 1 certified coach, level 2 certified coach, and a level 3 certified coach. And at each level, there are different requirements to be to be that coach, right? And then when you get to a certain level, you can become a head coach, and you can go on to national games or world games. Most coaches fall within that level 1, level 2 certification, but the really advanced coaches will go on to our level 3 certification. And again, our programs may vary that a little bit based on their needs within their program and what motivates coaches to want to do more to be better coaches. So that's really an overview of what we do in Special Olympics.
Thanks, Gary. Definitely some challenges that most of us don't have to deal with on a regular basis. Not only with all that, but across many sports as well with that one. We'll change gears a little bit here and go to Allie Riley with the Girls on the Run International, where at least we're talking about one sport, but obviously many facets to it. So Allie, you have jumped on the screen share, so run with it.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Allie Riley. I'm the Senior Vice President of Programming and Evaluation at Girls on the Run International. I'm very excited to be with you all today. So I have been in my current role for 8 years, or with Girls on the Run, rather, for 8 years. And my background is all in sport-based PYD in various settings, development, delivery, and evaluation. So I'm going to give a little bit of background on who we are as an organization and how coaching education shows up for us. So always love to start with our mission. So we inspire girls to be joyful, healthy, and confident using a fun, experience-based curriculum that creatively integrates running. And when we say run, we really mean that looks different for all girls. So walk, push, roll, whatever it takes to move forward. We are a national movement, and we actually have recently added Canada back to our council team. So we serve pre-COVID about 200,000 girls a year through 180 local councils. So it sounds similar to Gary, what you were saying. So we're a federated model. The majority of our councils are what we call independent. So they have their own 501c3 status. And then we have others that fall under the umbrella of another nonprofit. So it could be a YMCA, a Boys and Girls Club, and then still others that fall under the umbrella of our headquarters. We have about, again, in pre-COVID times, hopefully we're building back to 50,000 coaches a year, volunteer coaches that bring the program to life in all of these various communities. And we've served about 2 million girls to date. We are very focused on serving all girls from all backgrounds and providing a meaningful and engaging experience. And when we say all girls, we mean girls of all intersecting social identities, including individuals of all races, ethnicities, thinking styles, with and without disabilities, income levels, sexual orientations, gender identity, religion. So I'll talk a little bit about some work that we're doing currently to help advance our work in inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, which we talk about as IDEA at Girls on the Run. So here is a diagram of sort of the work that we do. So you can see that trained coaches are really critical to bringing the program to life in our communities. So we have trained coaches. We have an intentional curriculum, which I'll talk about briefly in a minute. So all of our coaches deliver the same curriculum, which is very different than, again, what Gary was sharing, where it's a lot of different sports. We have we are preparing coaches across the country to deliver this program. And then you see our outcomes here. So the 5 C's plus 1 are our life skills outcome. I would say life skills are definitely the higher focus for us. We're using physical activity as a vehicle to teach life skills, primarily running and other types of physical activity. So we just wanted to show this for the purpose, again, of showing this how coach training is centered, and also that we are really focused on the development of life skills. Some of you may know Dr. Maureen Weiss, who's at University of Minnesota, but she did an external study for us in 2016 to evaluate the impact of Girls on the Run. And we did find that girls develop the skills over the course of the program, and then those were maintained 3 months post-program, and that the girls in our program were more likely to transfer the skills that they learn in Girls on the Run to other settings as compared to to a comparison group. We have 3 programs that we deliver. About 90% of our girls participate in Girls on the Run, which is our elementary school program. So that's 3rd to 5th grade. We also have a middle school program that we call Heart and Soul, and then a 1-month camp program, which is Camp Goater. So all of them, again, have the similar components that are critical. It's just based on sort of the format and also age as to how they come to life. All right, so let's talk a little bit about coach education at Girls on the Run. Before I dig into that, just to, again, create some, just a little background for you. So about 95% of our coaches are identify as female. And we really are focused on, again, like Gary said, like it's not always the traditional coach who looks at the name Girls on the Run and says, yes, I would love to coach. So we have folks who just are really interested in contributing to the girls in their communities. And so we have to be creative sometimes in how we talk about even using the word coach. You know, you hear the word coach and people automatically think that's not for me. We also have about 40% of our coaches are teachers, about 35% are family members, and another 35% are from the community, so not connected either to the site or the girl. All right, so I think these, I want to highlight these kind of three components when it comes to coach education. So our intentional curriculum, and then we have a blended model for coach training for all of our new coaches. The intentional curriculum, so it's 20 lessons for Girls on the Run and Heart and Soul. So the girls are training for a 5K over the course of a season, and each lesson is focused on a different life skill. And so they're preparing for that 5K, which again, hopefully soon to be a big community event, celebratory event with all of the sites within a given council coming together. So the teams meet in small teams of 15 with about 2 volunteer coaches, but then at the end of the season, the teams all come together in a community. So here you just see a few elements of the curriculum, but when I think about coach education, this is really, this is what they have as a tool going out into the field. We also prepare them in advance through our blended coach training. So here you can see, so they participate in online training prior to coming to in-person. And here are some of the topics that we cover. So basic background, policies, procedures, high level about the curriculum, girl development. We worked with Darkness to Light on a sexual abuse prevention module. And then this summer we added coaching and social inclusion so that coaches have an opportunity to identify their own biases and just have the tools and strategies to create spaces for all girls and to navigate conversations around social justice issues. Then they come to in-person and they do a mix of activity-based as well as just sharing with one another. So bringing their own expertise, hearing from our girls through videos, completing activities, discussing best practices. And then on the left, you can see, again, the topics that we cover within that training. So very much focused on positive youth development and creating a space where all kids can be successful. They also have ongoing training opportunities. So that was what I just shared was our new coach training. And then at year 1 and year 2, they have either a virtual module opportunity or participate in a returning coach kickoff, which is really about getting them excited, again, bringing their expertise together and honing in on and kind of leveling up their skills in certain areas, depending on what's of interest to them. And then, so in terms of how this comes to life in communities, we do a train the trainer model. So our council staff come together with our HQ team and we go through the training and we really focus on preparing them to be able to deliver it in their communities. And then they deliver the training with their coaches in their local communities. There's also a council specific component of every coach training that really brings to life the things that are specific in those areas in that council or community. Councils also do site visits throughout the season, so there is this ongoing opportunity for learning and development as coaches. It's one thing when you're in the training and another when you're out there with the girls and you have 15 kids staring at you, as we all know. So giving them that opportunity to continue learning. All right, I'm going to wrap up quickly, but this has been an evolution. So the content I just shared, there was no coach training or a national coach training in 2014. So our councils were just reinventing the wheel every time they had staff turnover, or all 200 councils were doing something different. So we, in 2016, we launched the national coach training and then have refreshed it to add content on trauma, disability inclusion. We did a lot of work with the National Center on Health, Physical Activity, and Disability, starting in about 2017. with coach training in our curriculum. And then of course, with COVID, we went all virtual. And that leads us sort of to the work we're doing now, which is working with an external review organization to look at our curriculum from the lens of inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, and to identify ways that we can continue to make improvements to that and our curriculum. And that will inform a revamp of our national coach training, which we have slated for the next, over the next year. So that just gives a little bit of a background and evolution. And I will, I think, turn it over to Paul now.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Paul Caccamo, and I'm the founder and CEO of Up to Us Sports. I'm going to stay on this first slide a little bit and just tell you what Up to Us Sports is. We are the national service that is AmeriCorps program for coaching. AmeriCorps is the federal agency that funds things like Teach for America, City Year. We're the coach version, which is how do we get young men and women to step up in their communities and give back by coaching sports. And obviously the focus of our program is communities where kids do not have equal access to sports participation. And one of the unique, I think, components about us as a national service program is that there's a lot of young people in the same communities we serve. And in this case, I mean young people like young adults who they played sports, and they attribute sports as being a major factor in their ability to deal with many of the social, economic, racial discriminations and pressures that they grew up with. And so our program targets those young men and women to be our coaches in the communities where they live. So it's kind of a double whammy. It's let's get kids playing sports again. A lot of kids in poor communities are 1/3, 1/4 is likely to have opportunity to play sports. But let's also get young men and women from those communities to be coaches, to be mentors, and to be leaders, and to realize that coaching is a pathway to their own economic mobility and success. So with that said, I know a question always comes up, so I want to answer it right here, which is, we don't run programs. What we do is we find programs that are already in these communities that either want to grow or they may be very small and they're still in the startup phase. Those are the programs that we go after and say, can we help you? Can we bring an AmeriCorps Up to Us Sports coach to your organization, to your community? It could be a nonprofit, a school, a park. And the purpose of our coach that we're going to co-train and support is to help you serve more kids and grow in your community. And our ultimate vision is that every kid has equal access to sports. So we have placed 4,000 coaches, and they have served hundreds of schools, parks, and nonprofits in about 22 cities across the nation. And we're growing. So with that said, I'd like to share our SPYD coach training process. And I'll get into SPYD in a second, but whenever they talk about, oh, you know, you're a coach program, coaching and mentoring, what's the secret sauce? The secret sauce is SPYD. Cam, can I have the next slide, please? So I am going to define SPYD in a second for those who don't know, but let me just tell you that we learned a lot during COVID. And so I'm actually working with all of you on this call, so thank you for joining us today, to share where we're going more than where we've been. So I'm going to do that in the next few slides. But first, where we're going is largely shaped by the collective experience of this last year. And so looking at that, it really caused a sort of rethinking moment. First, let's just run down this list. What do the studies show? I think all of us know, and again, I'm focused on youth sports. All of us know that young people, the number one reason they want to play sports is fun. And then there's positive peer building, and then there's the opportunity to learn. Those are always the top three, regardless of gender. Like, I want to have fun, I want to be part of a peer group, and I want to learn something. I want to know every day I've gotten a new level that a kid internalizes, like I mastered something that I didn't yesterday. So that's what we know from studies is the top thing. And then comes the athletic, the ability to be the best soccer player in the community, go to college with a scholarship. But from a kid perspective, going back to when I was young, our parents just let us out the door and we just made up our teams and everything. It's that pure bonding and fun. Then we have what COVID taught us. COVID taught us that kids missed their teams, that kids were dealing with unimaginable mental health stresses and traumas. And that a lot of times when kids played sports, it was agonizing to be locked in an apartment and not to be with your peer group. And so, you know, kids missed the opportunity to be physically fit and physically active, and we had to adjust to how to get kids active virtually. But I think we all know this, you can't emphasize enough what a traumatic experience it was for kids not to socialize. And I will say that I would guess a survey would show that kids who played sports, the number one thing is they missed their team. I think more than their class. So what does sports mean in light of this? It means that it is probably one of the most effective pathways to youth development. So what should coaching be? Sports-based youth development, SBYD. Next slide, Kim. Sports-based youth development, in just a few words, is using sports to foster the mental, physical, and social well-being of youth. Next slide, Kim. So in light of all that I just shared, we've been thinking about what is the total youth experience in sports. So many of us, because sports has gotten so segmented over all these years, so many of us think of sports as like, oh, you know, it's gaining skills and being a great lacrosse player, squash player, tennis player. But the total experience, given what I said, is actually 3 different things that are converging. And one of them is youth sports, the sports experience. But the other one is positive youth development. And there's a whole field of youth development, you know, going back decades around mentoring, that sports, you know, we always say, we got this as coaches, but do we? So many mentors, trainers in kids' lives, counselors, they go through intentional training on what is youth development and how do you accomplish it. Do coaches, or do they just say, we got this? So for us, there is some intentional training that comprises the positive youth development experience that a coach is responsible for. And then we also have this emerging field in the last 10 years in professional sports with professional athletes, and it's sports psychology, or in this case, I'm going to say mental performance. And this is the discipline of showing up on time, of having a strategy, of keeping everything in order in your life to be a positive athlete, nutrition, eating right. So that's also a part of a coach. Do we train our youth sports coaches on that? So for us, the SBYD training model, again, to achieve that physical, social, emotional, and mental well-being of kids needs to have this total experience of, you got to be good coach at the sport you're teaching, you got to understand positive youth development, and you got to understand mental performance. Next slide. So this next slide is, this is it. This is kind of our model in a framework, which is that in the middle is the coach. And those 3 circles are what a coach has the ability to do at every single practice with their youth. And they have the ability, I've already said it, so I don't want to be repetitious here, but positive youth development is one circle, mental performance, and teaching the skills of the sport. So there's a lot of components there within each of these. Everything from goal setting, physical fitness on the sports side, goal setting on the mental performance side, social emotional learning, you know, having social confidence, having a sense of positive peer belonging in the youth development side. A lot of these intermix. So what is a coach training framework that can combine this? And if we can figure that out and make this something that every coach can grab some piece of it, depending on what their level of youth sports involvement is, we can really get at outcomes that go, as my sign says behind me, not just on the field, but off the field. And so The circle on the outside is the youth and the outcomes. If the coach can handle those three converging circles in the middle, we can see from the outside and we can measure that we're going to show impact in a child's mental well-being, in their social emotional learning or their youth experience. And that's the name of the game, I think, for youth sports coaches. I will argue that's the name of the game for the future of sports, especially given the disparities that we're experiencing in this country in terms of access and quality and participation rates. So I believe this is my final slide. Next slide, Kim. The future of SBYD training is this. I think first, it's gotta be multi-level. Not every coach, we all know this, has time for a 40-hour curriculum. But maybe coaches who are volunteers at volunteer youth sports leagues can do an introductory piece. Maybe they can do some online interactive pieces that take a few hours to understand that they're responsible for that inner circle. And by the way, I would argue in my entire career in this field, 30 years, they're probably one of the most responsible and appropriate adults to take on that circle, because they have one thing that often teachers and sometimes parents don't always have, at least at every moment in a child's development, that coaches have trust. So if you have trust, you have to take on that circle. So first, this training has to be multi-level. If you're just a volunteer coach, what pieces can you do really quickly? All the way to, if you're an Up to Us AmeriCorps coach full-time, or you're a public school coach or a Parks Department coach, you should be certified in SBYD. Number two, in order to get at number one, it has to be multi-platform. And just like Allie said, there's gotta be different communication methodologies for training, from online to app to in person. Number three is, I believe we need to require SBYD training in schools, parks, and youth leagues across this country. I think we're doing a disservice to the capacity that all the coaches have to impact young people's lives in ways that we really need. Think of this last year: mental well-being alone, academic engagement. These are things that a trusting coach can impact. So I believe the future is seeing SBYD training required. And last thing is, this SBY training, that circle again, is foundational. From there, if you understand caring relationships, the role of physical activity, the importance of hydration and nutrition, all the three different examples in different circles, if you understand those things, then you get at fundamentally how to ensure the well-being of a young person. Now, I believe we can go on to level two, which is, let's talk about girls and empowerment. Let's talk about racial or social justice and how young people perceive racism in a team in this community versus this community. Or let's talk about inclusion and LGBTQ+ youth. But I think you have to start with that positive youth development foundation. Last slide. And I know you're all going to get this stuff, but I just want to repeat that that's me. And I always make myself available to anyone, whether you're interested in AmeriCorps coaches, or interested in training or collaboration. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I want to bring up Cliff Cook next from Lakeshore Foundation. And I want to just make a note here that the Grand Plan in Birmingham had been a great partnership with Lakeshore Foundation to be heavily involved with us there in Birmingham. And we appreciate all that work that got done. And we're really looking forward to that occurring in 2023, Kristen, right? 2023? I can't get my years straight on what it is. A little COVID hangover, I guess. And so, Cliff, how about bringing you on board here and talk about your work with the Lakeshore Foundation and the work of the Lakeshore Foundation?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. And I want to thank USCCE for the opportunity to be able to speak with you all today. My name is Cliff Cook, and I'm an Associate Director of Recreation and Athletics at Lakeshore Foundation. And first, let me introduce to you who Lakeshore is. And we are a nonprofit organization that serves individuals with physical disabilities or chronic health conditions through physical activity, fitness, recreation, sport, and research. They're essentially, if we were to try to explain who we are like a community-based organization, like a YMCA, for people with physical disabilities. But we do wear several hats here. We have an injured military program, and we'll bring in injured servicemen and women from around the country and introduce them to sport. We are an Olympic and Paralympic training site. And so we currently have the USA wheelchair rugby team training. I can actually hear them outside my office banging chairs right now. We have the USA wheelchair basketball team coming in to train next week. And it's kind of neat. We're providing a bubble atmosphere for them to where they're completely segregated from everyone else, taking all precautions that we can to ensure that they will not mess up their eligibility for the Paralympics. And those relationships that we have with those different teams, the highest level teams in our sports, are integral to what we're able to offer, at Lakeshore Foundation to our coaches. I've been at Lakeshore for 12 years and have coached myself. And so I started actually part-time as a swim coach and have worked through the ranks. And so I've been on the receiving end of the experience, as well as the more administrative end for the experience that our coaches receive. Before I get into kind of what the education is like for our coaches, I wanted to talk about some of the different sports that we offer at Lakeshore Foundation. So one of the sports is called power soccer. And this is for individuals that would use a power chair for mobility. And it's played 4-on-4 on a basketball court. And the objective of the game is to hit an oversized soccer ball into a goal. A very neat sport, but there's probably very few people on this call that would know the rules and be a good candidate to coach that sport, which is some of the barriers that we run into, is finding someone knowledgeable in the sport that can coach it. We also, like I mentioned, we have wheelchair rugby here. We have track and field for our athletes. There's swimming, archery, wheelchair basketball, the list goes on. And each one of those sports requires very specific knowledge in order to coach those sports. So not only do you need to be knowledgeable on the sport themselves and the tactical and strategic elements that go into understanding sport, but you also have to know how to work with people with physical disabilities. And also keep in mind that each one of these sports, there's numerous types of disabilities represented. And so one of the big things that we do at Lakeshore is we teach our coaches how to work with people with disabilities. It's always evolving and it's always changing, and the conversation is always developing. Like, think about terminology and the words that you use when you speak to people. There are words that you can say that are offensive, and then there are words that are more appropriate and more accepted today. And we teach our coaches how to navigate language and really meet the athlete where they are. There's also a requirement that we have as a training site. We require all of our coaches to be Safe Sport certified. And so they are required to undergo this training to make sure that they are aware of that. And so when we get into specifics on how do you develop the coaches in these sports that aren't necessarily common household knowledge in terms of being familiar with the sport. Well, first, what we like to do is look for anyone that has experience with the sport. And so that reduces our net of who we're looking for right away. So I think, kind of like Gary was saying, we do have lots of people that want to come in off the street to volunteer to help people with disabilities and provide coaching. But the question is, oh, that's great. What is your coaching experience with wheelchair basketball? And usually there's not very much. And so what we'll do is we'll look for people that have had experience with that, or if they've had an experience as an athlete. We like to develop athletes who have been through it, to develop them and turn around and be able to teach sports. And another thing that we have found that has been very beneficial, though this is challenging because it's not always obtainable, is finding someone to teach the sport that is similar to the population that they're going to be serving. So if they're working with people who use wheelchairs, it is great to have a coach that uses a wheelchair. So we try to find people with disabilities to work with people with disabilities to coach. We can't always deliver on that, but there is the ability that coaches that have physical disabilities, they are able to connect and encourage athletes in ways that people without disabilities simply can't. And there's just many advantages to that concept as well. So once we've kind of identified who we want to be a coach, then we're going to put them into a mentorship type role, to where they are going to either work with another coach who has experience, or we have the benefit of being a U.S. Olympic and Paralympic training site. We're going to connect them with the top level coaches in the country, and we're the United States of America, the world, right? We have the best coaches in the world. And so when they come in to train at Lakeshore, we oftentimes try to encourage our coaches to say, hey, those coaches are here. We want you to observe their training, and we want you to learn as much as you can from them through a mentorship type training. And so it's very hands-on and observational. And then the other really way that we encourage people to learn is, like, this is the like behind the scenes secret, is use the internet. Go to YouTube and look up different sports that you're interested in, and look at how other people are doing it. We don't pretend to have all of the answers here at Lakeshore and say that our way is the best way to coach. We want to see what other people are doing and how other programs are coaching. And with adapted sports, there are several resources available online, often for free, that we encourage our coaches to watch and just to broaden their horizon on how other organizations are doing it. There are continued education opportunities that we offer our coaches as well. And we kind of put it on our coaches to go out and look on what kind of further education would you like to receive? Is there something specific to your sport that you want to receive? Do you want to learn more about how to work with children? Do you want to learn more about how to work with adults? And we'll have them kind of look for the different opportunities that they would be interested in, bring them back to us. And oftentimes we send them to the different training and let them learn that way. And then the final thing that we have is we want to make sure that they always have accessibility to guidance. And so with us being an organization that has a physical location and we program out of this physical location, we always make sure that if our coaches have any questions about anything, we have an open door and they can come in and ask how to do certain things, if they need ideas on how to run a drill a certain way. The door is open, and the benefit that we have at Lakeshore is there's an extreme amount of knowledge here within the doors. And if I don't know how to help a coach, I can look right around the corner and there's going to be someone else that's either an athlete that would have some good ideas, or another coach, and be able to really help each other out through a team effort. And so that's kind of Lakeshore in a nutshell. Again, I'm excited to be here and look forward to any questions you might have.
And Cliff, we're happy to have you and hopefully continue our relationship with Lakeshore going forward with that. I really think it's really neat. The 4 organizations we have here really show that sport, that playing sports transcends into other areas and goes beyond it, whether it's an adult or youth, wherever the case may be. And a couple of questions in the chat that I'm definitely going to get to, but one question I wanted to ask a lot of you, because it came up in conversation yesterday. I know this varies because some of you are volunteer coaches, some are paid coaches, but what does the training look like for that, say that newbie coach coming in? How many hours of training probably do they need to take to, before they get out in the field with, with their athletes? And I'm going to pick on folks and go around so that it's not too awkward here. Gary, how about with Special Olympics?
Yeah, so in Special Olympics, you got to come in at a certain level. Before a certain level, meaning there's what we call like the non-negotiables. So when you register, become a coach for Special Olympics, it's a protective behaviors course. It's a background check, an orientation on Special Olympics itself, and then the courses from there can range from anywhere from 10 hours to 20 hours, and that is maintaining your certification over the years. So initially you'll come in and you'll take a sport-specific course and a course like a coaching Special Olympics athletes, so that you get both ends of that struggle we talked about with if you're sport related and not knowledgeable on intellectual disabilities and vice versa. And those can range from 2 to 4 hours. And then a lot of programs still do what they call a mentor program, where you've got to work with an experienced Special Olympics coach for up to 10 hours ahead of, maybe being a certified assistant coach or a certified head coach. From that point, it varies year to year. So I'll give you an example of a program that I was in. Every year you had to maintain your certification, you could take an online course, a course from another sport organization that was being offered, or something like a CPR first aid course. And online, there's like principles of coaching and courses along those lines. So those can range from anywhere from, again, 2 to 3 hours a year. So ultimately, over the course of like 4 or 5 years, you've put in about 20 hours or so of certification to be involved in it. But it's really that primary start of coaching Special Olympics athletes, getting the experience with the athletes, and then the encouragement and requirements of each program to say, to move forward, you need to continue to do this to better prepare you for coaching.
Thanks, Gary. Allie, what about for Girls on the Run?
So our online component is about an hour. So that's the pre-work to the in-person. And then the in-person is about 4 to 4.5 hours. And then one coach per team. If you hear screaming in the background, my kids are eating lunch. It gets a little crazy up here. And so CPR, first aid, at least one coach per team is trained on those. And then so that's the initial, and then ongoing is probably about an hour a year, I would say.
All right, great, thanks. And Paul's, yours is pretty in-depth.
Yeah, our coaches come in working at a squash program, a running program, a baseball program. So it's up to the local program to train the sport. So our foundation and the presentation I had about sports-based youth development, that's the part that we take on in our partnership. And so our coaches are year-round. They receive a living stipend from the federal government, and it's a 32-hour training program. And that's aside from things like safe sport, CPR training. And I'll just really quickly say, you know, coach training, those 32 hours, you can't put a coach, no sports coach in a lecture room for 32 hours. It is highly interactive. There's games, there's practicing the same activities that we want them to do with the kids. And then lastly, just what exactly can make up 32 hours. One is just that positive relationship team building. That's critical. And there's so much you can do with so many components of a practice to get there. And then number two is context, is we really talk about where are you coaching? Who are the kids you're serving? What's your community? Because if, you know, kids trust you all automatically. So do you understand what's going on just by virtue of socially where those kids are? Then the third is we looked at mental well-being and the impact of trauma and poverty, because most of our coaches are working in low-income communities. They're working in communities of color that are experiencing racism. And so how does our coach address mental health issues? How do they understand that the behavior of a kid is not necessarily the kid himself? It's the reflection of what they're dealing with around them. So we get a lot into, and then how do you inspire positive behavior choices for a kid? How do you address trauma? And the last thing then goes down to now, how do I organize all this into a practice so that I can now go out there and coach at my squash program, baseball program, with those principles in mind, with that understanding every single day. So that's a 32-hour course.
Thanks, Paul. Cliff, and what applicability is that question to yours, since you're a little different setup?
It is a little different. And the answer is pretty much we let them start coaching when they're ready. So there's not a hard number of hours. So like I said, we look for our coaches that can really come in and get going right away. If that's not possible, if we have a program that needs to have a coach and we have to develop a coach from scratch to lead that program, it's going to take a number of hours, possibly months, to really understand one, disability. Then they've got to thoroughly understand the sport. They've got to understand working with people, how to coach, and that is one of those, that's where mentorship comes in that I was talking about earlier. And we would put them underneath another coach and have them work with them and learn the sport in that way. And it comes down to, hey, when are you ready? Well, when are you ready to lead this program on your own? And so that's kind of how we navigate that.
All right. Thanks, Cliff. Really good question from Omar here, and I'm going to throw this to Gary first, is what are the barriers to your program as they're implemented now?
So for us, right, ultimately Special Olympics, one of the challenges we face is that, you know, we want our athletes to be viewed as real athletes, right? As those that know the rules, compete within the rules, are trained well. And so the challenge is sometimes one of the big barriers is getting the coaches. We get really dedicated people who want to do the right thing and do well. And we get the gamut, right? As I said before, but getting coaches in that want to improve their athletes holistically, like a lot of folks have been saying here today, not only on the field or on the court, but in, you know, health and nutrition. Our athletes struggle with healthy lifestyles. The amount of training that goes in not only to a sports season, but on a year-round basis for our athletes. So, you know, getting that trickled down to the program level so that instead of us looking like and I don't mean this to be a bad term, but like a recreational program, that we are a training and competition program. And so that general kind of mentality of, oh, we're doing it for the kids kind of thing. And it's all fun. Yeah, there's a huge social component to Special Olympics, huge. My daughter, it's a big piece in her life. And without it, I'm not sure what kind of social life she had, but it's a sports organization, and us trying to educate our coaches and move them forward in that direction, and then get coaches who think in that way is a challenge for many of our programs. We get why do I have to take another course? Why do I got to be certified to be a coach in Special Olympics? Because it's what the athletes deserve, and it gives our program credibility to be amongst those that, are considered those real sports, so to speak.
Gary, I think most of us, at least, I think my NGB colleagues can all nod their head going, yeah, we've heard why do I have to take another course? And I love your answer is what the athlete deserves is such a great answer. And I am going to steal that going forward. Fantastic. Allie,
what about royalties? I'll give you my address for royalties.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Yep. Totally. What Bitcoin work for you? Okay, we're good. Allie, what about Girls on the Run?
Yeah, so I'll just share a few of the goals of our upcoming revamp work really is to address some of our barriers from a coach training delivery perspective. So I think the technical side, we were new to the LMS world when we launched National Coach Training in 2016, and so much has changed and evolved, especially over the last year in the virtual space, and particularly since it's being delivered at the local level. So we have very small council staff that are trying to navigate our LMS. I think elevating, so to the point that was just mentioned, right? Elevating the value of this training and not like for our stakeholders, and also how it ultimately contributes to our mission. Like if we do nothing else and train coaches that can then go coach in other places and bring positive youth development to youth sport, then not only have we impacted our, Girls on the Run that season, that 20 lessons, but really we're preparing, as we all are, they're going on into other environments. And then again, our focus has always been around context and coaches understanding their context and how they can work with girls from all backgrounds, but just to continue to elevate that work within our organization. So I think those are some of our sort of main implementation, content, and also sort of marketing perception barriers, opportunities that we're focused on.
I guess I'll jump in. I think one of the biggest barriers is that is the infrastructure of youth sports is when it comes to the economic divide of the last decades, it's really fallen apart. In most under-resourced urban communities, schools kept the winning basketball team and everything else disappeared. Girls don't have any opportunity to play at all. So it's really sad. Parks programs when their budgets got cut, they cut programming because they decided the most important thing was to cut the lawns and turn the lights on. But if we can do that, we'll look good. But programming can go because we don't have the money anymore. So we've really, for everyone who's on this call from different levels of sports, if we don't get back to youth sports and how do we rebuild it and create equal access, it's not happening like it did decades ago. And so there's something coming down the line, and add to that COVID. I mean, a lot of young people are saying they're just not going to go back and play because it was too stressful, and COVID was stressful enough. So what is the answer to all this? I think, obviously, and that's why I'm here, it's train coaches. But I would say to your question, Omar, about what's our biggest challenge, I think it's that we have to, our coaches are taking on, I don't want to use the biblical word, God's word, work, you know what I mean? They're mentors. So many of our kids, the reason they got food during the lockdown was because our coaches went and delivered it. The reason that they stayed on class during lockdown was because our coaches checked in, no other person, sometimes not even a parent, and said, hey, I need you to be on class virtually on your computer today. So our coaches are really playing these multiple roles. The biggest barrier is we need to pay them. If we want to get coaches from the community who reflect the community, the volunteer system is not working in under-resourced urban areas. But for a young man or woman to be a coach in that community in the west side of Chicago, in Liberty City, in Miami, in Hunters Point, in San Francisco, if they want to be a coach, they're going to have to choose to be able to be there every day and be this kind of mentor. But when that store that is offering $15 an hour, and they are also one of the only economic resources for their household, they're going to have to stop coaching and go get that job. So I think a big barrier is not actually for us, what are the secret sauce of training? It's how do we compensate coaches to play the prolific role that they play in kids' lives so that we can have an infrastructure of coaching and therefore an infrastructure of youth sports throughout this country.
Thanks, and I can jump in, and yeah, it's exactly like what Paul was just saying, that one of our biggest barriers is, and we do pay our coaches, but most of our coaches are part-time staff, and the part-time staff, there's no way that this can be a salary or stipend that is enough to live off of. And so what we're requiring, and again, like what we're looking for, are highly skilled, highly educated, highly experienced people to work in our field and deliver our sports to coach. And we're only able to offer part-time compensation for that. And so they won't get benefits. And so finding those people that are able to do that scenario is a barrier. And then for us, another just huge and obvious barrier is COVID. There's several of our sports that the seasons were just canceled. And there are even some that are canceled through 2021. And so there's a lot of our sports that are coming back right now. But there's a sport called goalball, and it's canceled through 2021. So we don't even have the opportunity to offer it, which is really kind of beyond our control, but definitely a barrier that we are experiencing.
Wow, that's a shame that all that's gotten canceled even that far out with that. Allie, this one is specific for you, and it comes from Andy, and this is probably really appropriate considering Andy Druska is the new chair of the accreditation committee at USCCE. He wanted you to talk a little bit about how you budget for evaluation, find funding sources, and how does that fit into your planning cycle?
So for the study that we did with Dr. Weiss, we had funding from a local agency that was interested in sort of innovative projects. And so he funded us. He funded us through the cycle and working with Dr. Weiss. I think also this is where the academic partnerships with local or with organizations is so critical, because we could not have paid the dollars that we pay, that we would have not been able to have the work done had Dr. Weiss not worked with us and provided some in-kind support. So we have also worked with other third-party researchers, and I'm like looking at $100,000 for a survey. Like, oh my goodness, that's not happening. So I think it's that partnership and getting buy-in. I've had to educate a lot around what evaluation means, and that sometimes it is this big external study, but it also can be very simple. And so I think over time, just the understanding of what type of evaluation needs to be done when, and then how that's going to impact the budget. So that was a sort of standalone project versus something that was built into the work that we were doing on another project. So like as a piece of it. But we built, and then we build into grant. We always build into our grants the funding for evaluation.
All right.
I'm sure if that answered the question. If not, feel free to follow up.
And
we can connect Andy and Allie. So got to let my fellow board member, got to throw him a bone there.
Sam, I'd love to really just quickly say that Up to Us Sports, we have a national federal study from the Office of Minority Affairs at HHS. And the question is to look at the impact of a trained coach versus kids who are playing sports without coaches trained in sports-based youth development, and to see if it has an impact on their participation, their health, their physical fitness, their nutrition. And I think it's really critical that we, like Allie was saying, we not only build it in, but we got to get those foundations across this country that are funding studies into social emotional learning, but they do not see the relationship between social emotional learning and sports. That we've got to get those, we got to give a wake-up call out there to a lot of these foundations to say, sports has got to be part of that study, because if a coach can have this kind of impact, can you imagine if Chicago Public Schools had locally trained SBYD coaches in every single school? What a difference that can make in outcomes. And I could pick any city. So I do think it's really critical we get this funding and these foundations aware of the need for our research.
Particularly right now, I mean, as we overcome COVID, right now we're looking at physical activity in a vacuum, which has been impacted significantly for all kids, and then SEL, which has been impacted significantly. So, like, this is the answer. Sport-based youth development is the answer to both of those things.
And Allie and Paul, I think the points that you both make in connection there with what you're doing, and I think all our panelists also value the connection between training coaches, that you're not able to find a ready-made coach, a ready-made program, Paul, in your case, that's flourishing and thriving, that you're actually having to do that work. So I think the additional, I hate to say, the formula in the algorithm is not just connecting the holistic development of the athlete, but it's developing the coach in order to develop the athlete. And I think that complete connection is what brings us all together, and how we can further recognize as an organization through the USCCE, how we can recognize and support what you're all doing, I think is what we're hoping to get from this panel and further initiatives as we move forward. So I really appreciate everything you've shared, all four of you, because it is really, it's innovative work and it's making a huge difference, and we need to see more of it.
Yep. And I have to be the bad guy here, but it's coming up on a quarter after the hour, and towards the end of it here. But I do want to thank you, Cliff, thank you, Paul, Allie, Gary, for sharing insights into your organizations and the training and the great work that you're doing, and blending in this idea of this sort of life development, skills development, and social emotional learning into sport, this the sports-based youth development part. And so thank you very much. Kristen, throw it back to you to take us out. Make any announcements that need to be made. You got to unmute yourself first.
Yes, and I also had to get the slides up. So thank you again. I knew in putting together this panel, we were super excited about the conversation, not only about where we're all headed and what needs to happen, especially the sport-based youth development conversation. The value of sport for all children, all participants, all athletes is so critical. And I think there's also some great highlights here from everybody around the importance of the trained and prepared people to do this work, to support the systems, which is again where the USCCE is really seeking to come together and bring people together to share how do we do this and what are some of the best practices happening, and how do we then make sure we're monitoring to continue to grow in the best way possible. So I can't thank enough Sam and Cam for putting this together and running the panel, and then of course to Paul, Allie, Cliff, and Gary for sharing with us their insights. And if anybody was not able, this was one that maxed out faster than we expected, and we will be posting this and making sure that it's accessible for all, because that is the intent and the purpose, to spread the conversation. So please feel free to let people know this will be up on our website. We will make sure that we tweet out when it gets up and out there. And in continuation of the conversation today, we will be switching over to the second Zoom link for the afternoon to go into the conversation being led around the evolving role of the coach developer, which tags nicely onto this morning conversation, the people who are helping the systems evolve and change, looking both globally and nationally at some of these conversations. This afternoon, having an interactive conversation led by Cam Kioskov and Leah McCarthy to look at what this next 5 years, next decade might look like. How are we going to help as a collaborative group work together to drive this forward, the people who are on the academic, and applied sides, because this will work only as a collaborative effort. And then, of course, the opportunity for those who really want to engage and chat at the end of the day will be there. So with that, I am going to stop the recording, and we will close down this session, and we'll see many of you hopefully over at the second session that will open up for the 12:30 afternoon sessions. Thank you so much again to everyone, and have a wonderful day.